Heard every week on amateur radio bands around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and one of the first podcasts of the Internet. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1418 of This Week in Amateur Radio.
The free ARRL Dayton Hamvention app for 2026 is now live alongside the web browser version. The Radio Amateurs of Canada are seeking a new editor for its Canadian Amateur magazine. The FCC approves limited emergency use of the 70-centimeter band for AST Space Mobile satellite control. We will have the details. The Texas Emergency Management Conference is coming up this month. The FCC modernizes its satellite spectrum sharing rules for broadband from space. The International Telecommunications Union releases a new free book on amateur radio satellites. Are you interested in helping NASA and space science? We will tell you how you can volunteer. A company based in Indiana will begin to manufacture high-gain and Cushcraft antennas. The FCC is seeking recent college graduates for its honors engineering program. The FCC has been asked to adopt a plan that will take 9 current UHF television channels away for the new 6G wireless. And scientists in Spain find traces of ballpoint pen ink in space rocks that have been returned from Mars. We will tell you how this mystery was solved in this week's report.
These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those satellites in orbit. Australia's own Ono Benshop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will answer the question, what does amateur radio bring to your life? Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us back to 1924. The summer of 1924 brought the first explorers to the 4 new, shorter wavelength bands that were opened up to amateur use in July. Amateurs anticipated interesting times ahead based on their earlier experimental work that produced the first transatlantic QSOs. This is part 2 of a series entitled DX Records and Shortwave Reflections. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Salyers, AJ8B, in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now.
Reporting from our headquarters studio facility just outside of Albany, New York, here in the This Week in Amateur Radio Master Control Room, I'm George, W2XBS.
Reporting from our studio in Orland Park, Illinois, where spring is in the air and my search for a new permanent ham radio station leads me just south of a town called Radioville. I'm Mike Nikolich, K9DX Mike.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, this is George, Kilo Charlie 2, Oscar X-Ray Juliet.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Albany, New York, in the Geek Cave studios, I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting from our news bureau here in western Massachusetts, where it can't decide whether it wants to be warm or cold, I'm Marvin Turner, W0MET.
Reporting this week from my basement studio in Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
Coming to you from the very busy Space Coast of Florida, I'm Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting from our Train New York News Bureau, where the foliage is just about back on the trees, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo, Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our ham radio outpost in the western Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where finally the song of the lawnmower is being heard throughout our land, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
Hello, everyone. Before we get into this week's newscast, I'd like to tell everyone that This Week in Amateur Radio now has its own Discord server. That's right, a place online where we can discuss everything technology and amateur radio. So join us. Just go to Discord on your computer or download the Discord app on your portable device and search for TWIAR or This Week in Amateur Radio. We look forward to seeing you on the new This Week in Amateur Radio Discord server.
Leading off our news this week, you can make the most of your time at the Dayton Hamvention with the free ARRL Events app. Hamvention is the world's largest annual gathering of radio amateurs and will be held May 15th through the 17th in Xenia, Ohio. There's a lot to do and see, so use the ARRL Events app to make sure you don't miss a beat and plan out your visit right now. The app includes Hamvention's full program so you can browse and schedule forums, preview the extensive list of exhibitors, and find affiliated events. During the event, attendees can use other app features to follow the hourly prize drawings conducted by the Dayton Hamvention Prize Committee and browse building and site maps. Those attending are also encouraged to tap on the My Profile icon in the app to add their name, call sign, email address, and any additional information they would like to share with other Hamvention guests. The My Badge icon displays a QR code of your event badge that can be scanned by another attendee or exhibitor using the Scan Badge icon, instantly connecting shared contact information with other hams at the event. The app is available for Apple and Android smart devices. You may also access the web browser version, which is optimized for nearly any browser or mobile device. Download the app at www.tripbuildermedia.com/apps/ARRL, or you can use the web version. For more information about the 2026 Dayton Hamvention, visit hamvention.org.
The Canadian Amateur, which is published by the Radio Amateurs of Canada, is looking for a new editor. Alan Griffin, the current editor of the Canadian Amateur, the Radio Amateurs of Canada magazine, is retiring. The RAC is in search of someone to step into the role at the membership journal, which is published in print and digital versions 6 times a year. Candidates should be experienced in the publishing, journalism, or communications field and be familiar with desktop publishing software and the use of AI tools for writing. The editor is also responsible for the magazine's design and its content, which should be a balance of historical, technical, operating, and community-focused topics. Content should also reflect the RAC's priorities. The editor will also coordinate with advertisers and sponsors and manage the placement of ads within the magazine. This is a contract position that requires oversight of the editorial content and management of the full production cycle. The application deadline is May 15th. Interested candidates can send a resume, a cover letter, and work samples to the RAC office manager, Adam McDonald, at the email address racgm@rac.ca.
On April 21st, 2026, the Federal Communications Commission granted AST Space Mobile limited authorization, when not over the United States, to use 5 50 kilohertz channels in the 430 through 440 megahertz secondary amateur band for emergency telemetry, tracking, and control, or TT&C operations, for its planned satellite constellation. John Ross, KD8 IDJ, is here with the details.
The authorization applies only for communication with 5 specified Earth stations, each located well outside of the United States, and for which the foreign administration with jurisdiction also must separately authorize the communications. More than 2,500 comments were filed during the proceeding, including filings from ARRL and other member societies of the International Amateur Radio Union, IARU, AMSAT, and individual radio amateurs worldwide. After considering the filed comments, the FCC narrowed the request authorization to emergency TT&C only, and further provided that use of these frequencies is permitted only in emergencies when no other spectrum is available. Each emergency event is limited to no more than 24 hours. Transmissions are restricted to 5 specific center frequencies: 430.5, 432.3, 434.1, 435.9, and 439.5 megahertz, each with no more than 50 kilohertz bandwidth. In an April 29, 2026 statement, the IARU expressed concern with the FCC's use of Article 4.4 of the ITU radio regulations, which allows administrations to authorize non-standard frequency use under certain conditions. The IARU stated that other frequency bands allocated for satellite TT&C should have been used instead of amateur spectrum and encouraged amateurs to report any interference to their national regulators. ARRL filed comments in July and August 2025 opposing the applications, arguing that the request represented an unprecedented use of secondary amateur radio spectrum for an unallocated use by a large commercial satellite constellation. Such operations could cause harmful interference, particularly to amateur satellites in the 435 to 438 MHz subband. The FCC should avoid authorizing non-allocated uses that could impact primary allocations for amateur services in other countries. While the FCC ultimately granted the authorization, it imposed those significant limitations in response to these concerns that reduce the unlikelihood of interference. In the U.S., reports of suspected interference to amateur spectrum can be shared with the ARRL Regulatory Information Manager. The email there is reginfo@arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
While the FCC ultimately granted the authorization, it imposed the above significant limitations in response to these concerns that reduce the likelihood of interference. In the U.S., reports of suspected interference to amateur spectrum can be shared with the ARRL Regulatory Information Manager, whose email is reginfo@arrl.org. ARRL will oppose any similar unallocated uses of spectrum used by amateurs that might cause harmful interference to amateur services, and in particular will monitor this situation.
The U.S. Federal Communications Commission has announced that it is once again accepting applications for its Honors Engineer program. Initiated in 2018, the one-year development program gives selected candidates an opportunity to work with FCC personnel on innovative issues in the communications and high-tech arenas, including 5G communications technology, the national deployment of broadband services, and communications technologies intended to improve access to those with disabilities. Other areas of potential focus include communications technologies critical to public safety, homeland security, healthcare, energy, education, and transportation. In addition, those selected to participate in the Honors Engineer program will be eligible for continued employment at the agency. Application to the FCC's Honors Engineer program is open to recent college graduates with an engineering degree, as well as current engineering students slated to graduate this year. For more information about the program and instructions on how to apply, go to www.usajobs.gov.
A new proposal asked the FCC to clear out a large block of UHF broadcast spectrum, a move that could force more than 40% of U.S. TV stations to relocate. In an April 15th petition, a group called Landover Saturn 5 LLC urged the FCC to open a rulemaking that would repurpose channels 28 through 36 or 554 through 608 megahertz for flexible wireless use aimed at future 6G services. The plan dropped just 3 days before the start of the National Association of Broadcasters annual convention in Las Vegas. The company, which said it has the financial resources, technical expertise, and broadcaster relationships necessary for the success of this ambitious initiative, said the plan could generate roughly $15 billion for the U.S. Treasury while shifting participating broadcasters into shared next-gen TV arrangements.
The state of Texas is planning, and registration is open for one of the largest emergency management conferences. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with all the details you need to know.
The Texas Emergency Management Conference runs 3.5 days, May 26th to the 29th, 2026 in Fort Worth. Last year, there were 4,200 attendees from 45 states and 6 countries. Organizers say the multi-day educational event provides an unparalleled opportunity to foster collaboration among professionals, showcase innovative technology, and share insights that advance emergency management in Texas. And amateur radio is involved, too. Vice Director of the ARRL West Gulf Coast Division, Lee Cooper, W5LHC, is in charge of setting up a booth for the event, and he says it's about connections. Right. all about connections and contact. We can meet people from all over Texas and in some cases from out of the country, said Cooper. We can answer questions about amateur radio, help demonstrate what we do and how we work during disasters and emergencies. Cooper said just knowing who to contact, what agency can best provide the help you need, can save valuable time for all emergency situations. The ARRL West Coast Golf Division will have a working amateur radio station set up at the conference and also encourage and inform visitors about how they can begin the process of obtaining a license and get on the air. And over this past year, 250 Texas government employees now have their amateur radio license. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Registration information is available at the 2026 Texas Emergency Management Conference website.
In his pickup truck on the way back to Indiana from Starkville, Mississippi, ITU Corporation President and founder David Carpenter, KC9ATG, told the ARRL his company will indeed begin building high-gain and Cushcraft antennas. With more on this story, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, with this report.
Carpenter became interested last year in purchasing the antenna lines from Martin Jew, K5FLU, retired owner of MFJ Enterprises. We were not able to make the deal last year, said Carpenter, but I called him a few weeks ago, and with a handshake, the deal was done. ITU, which currently sells ham and CB gear as well as training products for multiple industries, has also purchased the former Linton National Guard Armory, which will become the new manufacturing hub for these legendary U.S. antenna brands. Carpenter said his company will soon begin moving the manufacturing equipment from Mississippi to Linton, Indiana, and start taking orders by the fourth quarter of this year. The new operation is expected to employ a staff of 20 initially and then up to 50 people. These antennas will be American-made, said Carpenter. Martin F. Jew, founder of MFJ Enterprises, was quoted as saying he expressed confidence that High Gain and Cushcraft, renowned for their robust design, high gain, and worldwide use by radio amateurs, will continue living up to their legacy under ITU's American-made engineering and customer-focused approach. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
With existing brands like TechShack and LearnLab already in its portfolio, ITU is positioning the Linton, Indiana site as a center for high-performance antennas, rotators, and accessories used by hams and professional stations.
The ARRL Foundation 2025 Bill Orr W6SAI Technical Writing Award has been awarded to Dr. Ethan Miller, K8GU, and Dr. Nathaniel A. Frissell, W2NAF, for their August 2025 QST article about traveling ionospheric disturbances. With more details on the awards, we go to League headquarters while John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this special report.
The editors of QST nominated Miller and Frizzell in August of 2025. The ARRL Foundation Board approved the awards in January of 2026, and the award plaques were distributed to Dr. Miller and Dr. Frizzell just last week. The award is an annual honor presented by the ARRL Foundation to recognize outstanding technical writing in the amateur radio community. I was so excited and surprised to receive the Bill Orr Award last week, said Frizzell. It was a great honor and one that means a lot to me. I'm very glad to be able to contribute to QST in this way. It's very exciting for me to have the opportunity to share my research work with my fellow amateurs. Frizzell is Associate Professor of Physics and Engineering at the University of Scranton. He founded and now leads the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation AMSAT Citizen Science Collective and is the advisor for the W3USR University of Scranton Amateur Radio Club. He is a winner of the 2017 Yasmy Foundation Excellence Award, the 2019 Dayton Amateur Radio Association Amateur of the Year Award, a 2021 inductee into the CQ Amateur Radio Hall of Fame, and is the recipient of the Orlando Hamcation 2026 Carol Perry Educator of the Year Award. Dr. Miller earned his doctorate in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois and has been an amateur radio operator since he was a teenager. He's been involved in HamSci since its beginning and currently works for a national security technology company. I'm honored and humbled to receive the Bill Orr Award, said Miller. It's rewarding to be part of a long line of authors of ARRL publications from whom I've learned so much in my ham career. William I. Orr, W6SAI, was an engineer, educator, and communicator of extraordinary ability. Over a period of 40 years, he wrote and edited scores of technical books and articles of interest to amateur radio enthusiasts. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
William Orr, W6SAI, wrote topics on ranging from basic electronic theory to microwave communications and the theory, design, construction, and magic of antennas. whether explaining electronic theory or the intricacies of microwave amplifier for Earth, Moon communications. Bill had the ability to use simple, plain language. He wrote about technical subjects in a way that naturally attracted amateurs who had an interest in the topic but lacked technical background in the area.
The promise of creating space for 6G communications on the 2.7 gigahertz band has moved closer to reality in the United States following the band's successful technical review by the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. The NTIA has been mandated to find room for full-power commercial licensed use on the band, which already has a pair of primary users, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the Federal Aviation Administration. The NTIA issued a press release stating that it is assisting both agencies to make sure that radar systems, weather monitoring, and aviation safety technology will not be vulnerable to interference. Ariel Roth, the NTIA administrator, said this milestone brings us one step closer to ensuring the American people realize the full benefit of this spectrum as quickly as possible. A report last year by the Global System for Mobile Communications Association cautioned that communication capacity will be challenged by 2030 unless more mid-band is identified for 6G use.
The International Telecommunications Union has dropped the 2026 edition of its Handbook on Amateur and Amateur Satellite Services, and it is a global regulatory document that's actually worth getting excited about. It's a comprehensive, single-source reference pulling together the technical, operational, and regulatory foundations of amateur radio and satellite activity worldwide, aimed squarely at administrations, regulators, and the amateur community itself. For the amateur radio community, this release is more than a handbook. It's a strategic tool. It underpins advocacy, supports education frameworks, and provides a globally recognized reference point for spectrum, licensing, and emerging technologies like amateur satellites and digital communications. Whether you're influencing regulators, designing new training pathways, or just trying to explain to someone that amateur radio is more than old blokes with microphones, this document gives you the backing of international policy, science, and decades of collective expertise. The free publication is available from the International Telecommunications Union website.
The U.S. Naval Academy Amateur Radio Club, Whiskey 3 Alpha Delta Oscar, will participate in the Department of Defense's Armed Forces Day crossband test on May 9, 2026. Several Naval Academy midshipmen and the members of the Potomac Valley Radio Club, including team leader Frank Donovan, Whiskey 3 Lima Papa Lima, will be operating on the grounds of the former U.S. Navy radio transmitting facility in Annapolis, Maryland. They'll activate the historic November Sierra Sierra call sign during the crossband test. See ARRL News for more details about the AFD crossband test.
The second Artemis mission took 4 astronauts around the moon and back, the first crewed deep space flight since 1972. Not everyone gets a chance to put on a spacesuit, but you can still be an important part of NASA's human space exploration story by doing NASA science. Volunteers with NASA's citizen science projects have tested chili pepper plant varieties to grow in space, monitored active regions on the sun, and analyzed data from experiments on how life adapts to the low-gravity, high-radiation environment of space. Participation does not require citizenship in any particular country. You only need a love of science and a desire to help. Join one of the projects and help NASA make space travel safer and healthier. Space Umbrella is a great project for you. The online project tutorial will teach you how to read data collected by NASA's Magnetosphere Multiscale mission, which has been flying back and forth across the Earth's magnetosphere since 2015. By sorting data into in-magnetosphere and out-of-magnetosphere readings, you will help scientists learn more about how solar storms interact with our magnetosphere. Solar storms can pose a serious threat to astronauts, so this work can help missions minimize risks from radiation in space. Through Growing Beyond Earth, middle and high school students and their teachers collaborate with Fairchild Botanical Garden scientists to grow candidate plants that are being evaluated as astronaut food. Today, on the International Space Station, astronauts tend to some of the same experimental leafy greens and hot pepper plants to unlock the secrets of how best to space farm terrestrial species. On really long missions, it won't just be a question of easing the monotony of packaged prepared foods. Astronauts will have to grow their own food to supplement their diets. For more details and to pick a project you might like, visit science.nasa.gov/citizen-science.
It is the beginning of a new month, and that means it's time for the Volunteer Monitor Report. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between the ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. This is the current activity report of the VM program. Technician operators in Michigan, Oregon, Utah, and Connecticut were issued advisory notices for 40-meter FT8 operation, a band on which technicians have no FT8 privileges but are allowed CW operation. Technician operators in Illinois, California, and Colorado were issued advisory notices for 20-meter FT8 operation, a band on which technicians have no privileges. An advisory notice was issued to an operator in Indiana concerning his operation on an expired license. An operator in Colorado was issued a commendation for outstanding operation in the America 250 special event. His operation was efficient and courteous, and complied exactly with the FCC's identification requirements for special events. The new automated FT4 and FT8 monitoring system has begun generating incident reports. The new system appears to be very effective and fair in continuously monitoring data frequencies to ensure that operators have the proper license for the band on which they are using FT4 and FT8. There was a virtual presentation about the volunteer monitoring program to an amateur radio club in Minnesota. There was one FCC meeting concerning continuing enforcement issues on 40-meter single sideband. The totals for this month's monitoring were 1,964 hours on HF frequencies and 2,560 hours on VHF frequencies and above, for a total of 4,524 hours. We thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
It is time for this week's edition of AMSAT Satellite Shorts from all over. We begin this week with news from the Federal Aviation Administration. It has grounded Blue Origin's New Glenn following a launch incident on Sunday from Cape Canaveral. The rocket performed nominally during ascent, but failed to place its payload, AST SpaceMobile's Bluebird 7 satellite, into the intended orbit. The spacecraft had been scheduled to deploy about 75 minutes after liftoff into a 460 kilometers circular orbit at a 49.4 degree inclination following a second upper stage burn. The FAA classified the event as a mishap and has opened an investigation to determine the root cause and ensure public safety before allowing a return to flight. According to available telemetry, the payload reached only about a 153-kilometer orbit instead of the planned altitude, rendering it unsustainable. Despite the anomaly, Blue Origin successfully landed and recovered the booster for the first time, supporting future reusability and higher launch cadence. Next, we hear that NASA engineers at Jet Propulsion Laboratory commanded Voyager 1 to shut down its low-energy charged particles experiment on April 17th. This in an effort to conserve dwindling power and extend the spacecraft's mission. The instrument had operated nearly continuously since launch in 1977, providing valuable measurements of ions, electrons, and cosmic rays in interstellar space beyond the heliosphere. Powered by a radioisotope thermoelectric generator that loses about 4 watts per year, Voyager 1 now faces critically low power margins after nearly 5 decades in operation. A recent drop in power during a routine maneuver raised concern that the spacecraft's fall protection systems could automatically shut down additional systems, prompting the team to act preemptively. 2 science instruments remain active, continuing to return unique data from a region of space no other spacecraft has reached. Engineers expected the shutdown to provide about a year of additional operation as they prepare further power-saving measures, including a planned system reconfiguration later this year. And the final story, SpaceX has completed a full-duration static fire test of its next-generation Starship version 3 upper stage, ahead of the vehicle's first flight. The test, conducted on April 14th, involved firing the engines while the rocket remained secured to the launch pad, demonstrating readiness for upcoming operations. Starship Flight 12, targeted for early to mid-May, will be the first launch of the larger and more powerful version 3 configuration. When fully stacked, the vehicle stands about 124 meters tall and features upgraded Raptor engines capable of delivering significantly greater performance. The new variant is designed to carry more than 100 tons to low Earth orbit, a substantial increase over the approximately 35-ton capacity of the previous version 2. NASA is now preparing for its Artemis 3 mission, which will test docking operations in Earth orbit between the Orion spacecraft and one or both contracted lunar landers, including Starship and Blue Origin's Blue Moon.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, age 8B. Well, let's start off this week with a press release from the Northern California DX Foundation, the NCDXF. Quote, the NCDXF is pleased to announce a $10,000 grant to Youth on the Air, or YOTA, Camp 2026. Neil Rapp, WB9 VPG, Camp Director, requested our renewed support this year, and with the inclusion of DXing in the camp program, we believe the camp aligns with our youth initiative. Take a look at the YOTA website for further information on this organization. You can see that they have a team of young people that you may have already worked in the expedition or a contest. Additional donations are encouraged. The NCDXF is interested in supporting the next generation of DXers and DXpeditioners. Accordingly, we will consider grant requests to assist with the cost for youth operators to participate in future DXpeditions. The mission of the NCDXF is to provide necessary financial support for well-organized DXpeditions to desirable DXCC entities and to support advances in DXpeditioning skills, technology, and infrastructure. These funds come from the contribution of our supporters in the DX community. Your contributions will help make DX happen. Visit our website at www.ncdxf.org. This was respectfully submitted by Ned Stearns, AA7A, who is an NCDXF Vice President. And that's terrific. And the more podcasts and information that Joe and I are getting, there's actually a lot of young people getting excited about DXing. And I'm very, very pleased with that. So the following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, drop me a note like several others have done. Send it to thedxmentor@gmail.com, and I'll get you fixed up. Well, let's start off with some African nations. Charlie November, which is Morocco. Charlie November 2, Nancy Quebec Victor is the call for Fox 8 Nancy Quebec Victor, who is QRV from Morocco until July 11th. The QTH will be the town of Sidi Rahal Shati on the Atlantic Ocean, 70 kilometers south of Casablanca. He plans on 40, 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters. Pascal Gears runs 100 watts to a diamond vertical on the rooftop, about 15 meters above ground level. So give a listen to that. And we also have Kenya, 5 Zulu. 5 Zulu 4 stroke Mike Oscar Zulu Bravo Hotel is QRV holiday style until June 15th with 100 watts and wire antennas. QSL via MM0 ZBH Home QTH, but his first choice is Logbook of the World for your request. Direct is an SASE. No US dollars or IRCs are needed. Paul says, quote, I'm happy to pay the return postage, end quote. I always put a little bit in there anyway, even when they say that, because they're going to get deluged and it's not cheap. Now, from the Asia Pacific, we have these two. Fiji, 3 Delta 2. 3 Delta 2 Juliet Kilo now has over 3,000 QSOs in the log after a nighttime 20-meter opening to Europe on single sideband. This is Sugar Papa 5 Alpha Papa Whiskey's expedition to Lakiba Island 22 years after the previous activation of this relatively rare IOTA location. He says conditions are still challenging, especially to work Western Europe. Interestingly, he did get a 6-meter opening to Japan. Japanese stations were copying him, but he copied almost none of them. He logged 3 call signs. His 6-meter and HF radio interfere with each other, so he can only do one at a time, one or the other radio, and the RF caused his computers to freeze, so he had to decide on the best way to keep making more cues rather than wasting time. And these guys run into all kinds of challenges, and that's just another one. For the Marquesa Islands, which is Fox Ocean / Mike, the TX9W logs were uploaded to Club Log through 0941 Zulu today. They made 3 CUSAs on 160 meter last Tuesday evening. They were being heard, but were copying very few answers. They found the flag antenna was ineffective and the vertical had a lot of noise on receive. By 1815 Zulu, they had put out a beverage on ground, and we'll see how it does on 160, the final night. Sunset is 0320 Zulu. If that doesn't help solve the issues, they'll have to go to 80 meters instead. Also, they installed a 3-element Yagi for 6 meters. They say it's a, quote, difficult QTH, end quote, on the side of an old volcano with mountains to the north, and actually, quote, there are no good QTHs in the Marquesas, end quote. Appreciate him trying to get it out, though. So now from Middle East, we have the United Arab Emirates, which is Alpha 6. Many Alpha 60 Papa Echo stroke number calls will be on the air as part of the national campaign of pride, quote, proud of the Emirates. Flag Day and Union Day, which is their national day, are popular national pride days. The current event started yesterday and goes through May 31st. So if you need A6 in the log, keep an eye out for that. For Ascension Island, which is Zulu Delta 8, we have this. Mike 0 Hotel X-Ray Charlie will be QRV as Zulu Delta 8 Kilo X-Ray, May 25th to the 29th, with an ICOM 705 to a 66-foot, 20-meter end-fed wire with 5 watts. CW is what he uses most, but he also does some single sideband and digital modes. On CW and sideband, he does split. CW is 5K up, sideband 10K up typically. Due to high demand, he asks DXers to just send a call sign and RST. Confirmation will be on QRZ.com, no LOTW or EQSL, and no paper QSLs, he says. From Chatham Island, we have this, which is Zulu Lima 7. Ruben, Zulu Lima 1, Alpha Juliet Charlie, is currently QRV from Chatham Islands as Zulu Lima 7, Alpha Japan Charlie. He's been reported on 40-meter single sideband. No other details are available at this moment. I need Chatham this year, so I'm going to track him down, and I'll get you the details. From the South Shetland Islands, we have this, and that's VP0/H. HF0 Papa Alpha Sierra at the Heinrich Artowski Station on King George Island, South Shetland Islands, will be put on the air by operator Sierra Quebec 4 Oscar Rafal, who, as part of the 50th Polish Antarctic Expedition, will be working there from May to October. He will be able to operate in his spare time and plans HF sideband and CW plus 6-meter FT8. This is an IOTA island, which is known as AN-010, so keep an ear out for that. From Tonga, which is Alpha 3, we have this. An Alpha 35 Radio Sierra 6-meter de-expedition is scheduled for May 14th to the 26th from Tongatapu Island, which is Grid Square AG28. The operator is Bob, ZL1 Radio Sierra, and he has an ICOM IC705 to an 8-element Yagi, quote, with some elevation. For 6 meters EME, he will be using Q65-60A mode, and he's planning Q65 pileup format, somewhere between 50.19 and 50.222, avoiding terrestrial QRM. He will be on the ON4KST EME chat and the ON4KST Region 2 chat through Starlink. During non-EME times, he will be on 50.313 FT8. Having some hearing loss, he says, quote, sorry, my hearing no longer supports operating in analog modes, end quote. Tonga would be a great one to get on 6 meters. And now we have Iceland, Tango Fox. Rick, Tango Fox stroke WE9 Golf, will again be traveling, this time to Borg, Iceland, May 10th to the 19th, activating IOTA EU-021 and grid HP94OB. He will have 3 radios on, a pair of IC7300s and an IC705 to a homebrew Reichenbach type vertical, a tunable vertical, and a GR5E. He will do a 160 through 6 bands, mostly FT4, FT8, and FT2 with some SSB and CW. A park on the air or POTA activation is also possible depending on his local transportation there. all QSL Direct or Bureau to WE9G and TF/WE9G on club log, and OQRS, QRZ, and LOTW. Now, here's a quick one. If you're listening to this the day I release it, you've only got 48 hours. May 1st to the 3rd, Alpha Uniform 2 Mike, Arnala Island, which is part of the nation of India or the entity of India. Following the loss of a bag containing a spider beam, receive loop antennas, and coax cable in transit to Hyderabad from Lakshadweep, the DX India Foundation has received, quote, crucial support from IOTA Limited and Synergy Telecom, as well as the RSGB and the CDXC for their AU2M, Armala Island reactivation project. VU2RS Sarath Rayapula says that, quote, things are now back on track again. Now, they're only going to be there till May 3rd. So like I said, when you're listening to this, you may only have 24 or 48 hours, but that would be a good one to get in the log. This week, the DX Mentor podcast will feature Vasily, R7 Alpha Lima, and a discussion about the upcoming activation of Franz Josef Land, the northernmost DX entity in the world. Give it a listen and let me know what you think. Are you attending Hamvention this year? If so, why not join DXers at two events? The first event is the DX Dinner sponsored by the Southwest Ohio DX Association. The dinner will be held Friday night, May 15th at the University of Dayton Marriott. The keynote speaker will be ARRL CEO, DXer, and DXpeditioner David Minster, NA2AA. Your second opportunity is to stop by the DX Forum held on Saturday morning in Room 1. Brian, Alpha Delta 8 Fox Delta, has put together a great lineup. The topics are, quote, the 3Y0K Bouvet DXpedition, and that'll be at 10:15 a.m., Desisheo 2026 DXpedition, the first all-solar powered, unattended DXpedition in history, and that'll be at 11:15. And then Failures and Lessons Learned from DXing in Adverse Conditions, 12:15 p.m. And that one's by Paul, N6PSE, and he's very, very good. I will be around all those events as well. Track me down and say hello. I'll have my Swadexa shirt on, and I'm also 6'9", so you really can't miss me. If you have questions or you need information about anything we talked about, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com, and I'll take care of you. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my ex-whale Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. Have a great DX week.
Welcome to the 53rd segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio. Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. With our gratitude to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website for these segments, we bring you this, the next chapter of Ham Radio History. DX Records and Shortwave Reflections, or the Heaviside Road to the Antipode. This is part 2 of this segment. On 8 December, the Haverford College, Pennsylvania test team played a game via amateur radio with a team from Oxford that had traveled 70 miles to the home of Marcus at G2NM. U3OT hosted the Haverford side. It was not the first chess game played on the air, but was certainly the first international one. Haverford had previously played chess with a group at the City College of New York. The two stations tested conditions at various wavelengths, finally arriving at sufficient reliability on 85 meters. The game did not conclude, but went for 5.5 hours and 11 moves for each side, at which point the two sides agreed to continue in January. Warner wondered whether Godley ever thought that just a few years after his memorable visit to England, we would be playing 5.5-hour chess matches across the puddle. International QSOs were now occurring nightly between all continents, all in the wavelength range of 75 to 100 meters, still only a small step beyond the previous year's work. UK and NZ stations, now in regular contact at dawn and dusk, respectively, reported that it was easier than contacting the U.S. and attributed that to the antipodal effects rather than the as yet unknown gray line propagation. It also implied that the signals were going via the long path, throwing most common held notions of DX limits out the window. This alone should have ended all the talk about antipodes. With thus auspicious a curtain rise, who can say what this season has in store for us? Apparently there is no end to the possibilities. Just think, we haven't plumbed the shorter wavebands yet. wrote Warner. What he referred to as shorter wavelengths were still largely a mystery. Recent tests demonstrated that 220 miles could be covered on 40 meters in daylight, something not possible on any other wavelength as far as was known, making the band very interesting to experimenters. Referring to 20 and 5 meters as extremely short wavelengths, at this point they were touted as being free from interference and nothing more. To encourage amateurs to explore new allocations, the ARRL established awards for experimental operation, one for each new band. The rules emphasize low-power operation and limited transmitters to using a single tube rated at 5 watts. Because directly measured power was not yet easy to do, the rule was based solely on tube specifications. If you bent the rules, you risked burning out an expensive piece of equipment. The contest period, it was called that despite being billed as an experiment, would run nearly 4 months from 1 February to 25 May 1925. It was not fully QSO-based as contests are today. Contests mattered, of course, and counted in the score, but the event was more of a test, like the transatlantics, where one-way communications were the main objective. Any given transmission would be counted for the contest only when a receiving station confirmed it by letter, telegram, or postcard and agreed with the submitted transmission log. An entry consisted of complete logs and confirmations of transmissions, diagrams and photographs of the station, and a notarized sworn affidavit attesting to adherence to the rules. Excessively long CQing or other such calls could disqualify an entrant as would violating any of the rules. A 40-meter award, the Cooper Cup, was sponsored by J.C. Cooper of Atlanta, and 20 and 5-meter ARRL Cups were sponsored by the league itself. The announcement offered very little description of what would constitute a winning entry, but experimentation was the key. Crews emphasized that although QST had been publishing information about how to operate below 100 meters, the league had no monopoly on ideas. The way to get somewhere in this shortwave business is not to trail after someone else, but to make a trail of your own, he wrote. The 20-meter test results were encouraging despite a general lack of adherence to the schedules. While no nighttime signals got much further than about 100 miles, daylight QSOs were plentiful. Among the best were a QSO between Hoffman 9EK in Madison, Wisconsin, and Reinhardt's at 1XAM, who worked each other until signals dropped out around 4:40 p.m. Eastern Time. 6AJF had copied the entire QSO from California, too. Since it was about 2.5 years past the solar minimum, they may have randomly hit a particularly quiet string of nights for their test. A few days later, the pair made contact again, this time decreasing power to a very low level, 8.5 and 16 watts. On the heels of his QSO with 9EK, Reinhardt's worked 6TS on 20 for 14 consecutive days. They worked each other on 40 meters at night on those same days, also something new. It was all done with standard circuits, no trickery. It was just the latest demonstration of the usefulness of the short waves. Reinhardt's was also the first to cross the Atlantic on 20 in a QSO with G5LF. But as amazed as they were with 20 meters, they did not yet grasp the band's full potential. While the tests had provided brilliant proof that 20 meters is one of the most useful waves we have, they prematurely proclaimed the utter worthlessness of the band at night. William H. Schick, 2MU, had been listening on 40 meters from his Brooklyn home for some time, logging mostly harmonics. On 2 January 1925, he heard 6TS in Santa Monica and thought it was yet another harmonic until 6TS signed his call and added 40 meters to his identification. Such was the pervasiveness of harmonic generation. Using his one-tube Hartley oscillator feeding a 50-foot-long T antenna strung between the roofs of apartment buildings, 2MU returned the call. The two city dwellers established contact around 7 p.m., the first cross-country QSO on 40 meters. And in February, the first confirmed QSO between the U.S. and Japan took place when 6AWT worked JA2 at the Imperial Naval Academy in Nagasaki. Bartholomew Molinari, owner of 6AWT, was a baker who operated from his home on Union Street in San Francisco. By the end of the year, his station had been heard in multiple countries, on all continents, and he had worked all 48 states. Not due to any special equipment or antennas, his success rather stemmed directly from pushing to ever shorter wavelengths, brought about in part by necessity. He had originally moved down to concentrate his operation on 80 meters because with 50 broadcast listeners within a 6-block radius of his home, he could not use 200 meters lest he be deluged with interference complaints. He later received the 1924 Hoover Cup, following Don Wallace 9ZT the year before. More information can be found in the What is an Amateur segment.
We'll continue this segment next week.
Included in this material are quotes from the following. S. Cruz, 3 cups offered for shortwave work. QST 1925, page 17. Experimenter Section Report, QST, February 1925, page 31. Daylight Radio Communication Wins, QST, March 1925, page 9. Who was first to cross on 20 meters, QST, July 1925, page 30. Experimenter Section Report, QST, March 1925, page 50. 6TS and 2MU, first to cross on 40 meters, QST, March 1925, page 35. Clinton B. DeSoto, 200 meters and down, the American Radio Relay League, Incorporated, 1936, page 100. 6AWT, Hoover Cup winner, 1924, Amateur Radio Stations, QST, May 1925, page 54. With our thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The other day I went for a walk around the block for the first time in a while. It's something I did for a time and then, for several reasons, mostly to do with health, didn't. For me, it's the mental equivalent of having a shower with the added benefit of not having to dry my hair. In other words, it's a place I go to with the intent of generating shower thoughts. During my walk, away from the forces pulling me in all manner of directions, none of which have anything to do with amateur radio, away from my keyboard, away from my screen, away from technology challenges, although I'll admit that my phone was in my pocket, I took about 20 minutes to walk and daydream, to follow my thoughts and see where they'd end up. I got to this point because sitting at my desk I was getting nowhere trying to put together my thoughts in any sequence at least resembling coherence. While it's happened before, it's not something that occurs often. The day before I'd started writing, almost as if possessed, about what amateur radio means to me. But during my walk I started wondering about the people who leave this hobby and the community embracing it. I've often said that F-Troop is a weekly net for new and returning amateurs, both people who have a license that's still hot off the printer, and others who have one typed up on an IBM Selectric, signed with a quill, ink faded with age, paper yellowed by sunlight, potentially with coffee mug rings on it, stashed somewhere in a drawer. I wondered about those returning amateurs and asked myself about the nature of leaving a hobby. It occurred to me that people leave for many different reasons, and it would be foolhardy to consider that all of those reasons are controllable by our community. While bullying and arguments exist, each responsible for their share of people leaving, it seems to me that some amateurs leave because there's too much other stuff going on in their lives, things that actively or passively prevent amateurs from participating. This is difficult for me to relate to because, for me, amateur radio is an intrinsic part of my life, in that it often quietly shapes how I view the world and learn from it. I see it when I notice a television antenna pointing in the wrong direction, when I install a new Wi-Fi router somewhere, when a signal is lost to a manned mission around the moon, when I open the garage door, and when I read that researchers at the National Institute for Standards and Technology, better known as NIST, have developed a new method for creating chips that process photons similarly to how traditional chips process electrons, which can generate a rainbow of colours, though they didn't use the letter U to describe them. While those examples might be somewhat obvious, Amateur radio is also there when I see someone share a tiny electronic paper screen on social media, and I consider how I might use that when I go portable. It's there when I'm walking in a park and when I'm looking at a beach. It's there when I see metal artworks or painters' poles at the local hardware store, and when I watch a movie with radios anywhere on screen. It's there when the topic of physics arises and when some electromagnetic phenomenon occurs. Like radio waves and air, it's pretty much part of my daily existence. I will add that this same depth of connection exists between me and computers. Watching Flight of the Conchords, I cannot help but notice that Murray's computer keeps changing, and that I miss the Commodore VIC-20 sitting behind him, surrounded by ever-changing New Zealand tourism posters. In other words, I cannot imagine ever not having radio or computers in my life. I'm mentioning all this because my experience isn't universal. While I'm sure that I'm not alone in this deep affinity, the community as a whole invariably ranges between people who could take or leave the hobby at a moment's notice, and those who couldn't live without it. And beyond our community, there are people who are, depending on your perspective, blissfully or woefully unaware of our existence. All this to say, your experience of this hobby is not the same as that for everyone else. Neither is your experience of life. This is revealed more clearly in what we think the hobby means, whether or not FT8 is a blessing or a curse, contesting is ridiculous or amazing, why 40 meters is better than 20 meters, or vice versa, and if the hobby died when the ITU stopped requiring Morse code, or saw a rebirth. It should be obvious by now, but I think it's important to be explicit. Amateur radio is your hobby. It's what it means for you. Not for your mate, not for me, not for the people in your club, the local email list or social media. Just you. So use this as an opportunity to think about this, in my not-so-humble opinion, absolutely amazing hobby, and what place it has in your life. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
The Federal Communications Commission this week voted to modernize its satellite spectrum sharing rules. This is a major step toward enhancing the satellite broadband experience for millions of Americans by enabling faster speeds, lower costs, and greater reliability. This change could also unlock more than $2 billion in economic benefits for the American people and up to 7-fold more capacity for space-based broadband services. The report and order adopted this week replaces the equivalent power flux density framework with modern, performance-based GSO protection criteria that take account of the improved spectrum sharing possibilities that modern satellite technology has brought, including through use of adaptive coding and modulation. The new sharing regime builds on the Commission's time-tested framework for good faith coordination to allow NGSO and GSO operators to bargain for appropriate interference protections through voluntary private agreements. The current, decades-old regulatory regime has significantly limited the ability of operators to deliver high-speed, low-latency broadband services to consumers. Until now, NGSO operators' power levels have been restricted by EPFD limits developed in the late 1990s to protect GSO satellites. Such limits were based on theoretical designs for NGSO systems of that era long before modern advancements were developed for the NGSO constellations currently in orbit. This government-imposed overprotection of GSO systems has meant that American households and businesses, most critically in rural and remote areas, do not receive the fastest space-based broadband American innovation has available.
An update presented by AMSAT President Drew Glassbrenner, KO4MA, at the 2026 CubeSat Developers Workshop is now available for viewing on YouTube. The presentation provides an overview of AMSAT's current satellite development program and future mission plans, along with its ongoing efforts to support amateur radio in space. The CubeSat Developers Workshop, held April 14 through the 16th at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, California, is an annual 3-day conference focused on small satellite development. Now in its 23rd year, the workshop brings together participants from academia, industry, and government to share knowledge and practical experience in CubeSat mission, with an emphasis on hands-on learning. During its presentation, Glassbrenner provided an overview of AMSAT's mission as a volunteer organization dedicated to building and operating amateur radio satellites. He noted the organization's long history, dating back to 1969, and highlighted the continued operation of early satellites, such as AO7, which remains functional more than 5 decades after its launch, when illuminated by the sun. Glassbrenner then outlined AMSAT's current satellite development efforts, focusing on the Golf T mission, a 3U CubeSat, expected to be completed later this year or early next. The satellite's designed to carry a 30 kHz linear transponder for amateur communication, along with a 10 GHz high-speed experimental downlink and improved 3-axis attitude control. He also described the follow-on Fox Plus series of CubeSats, which incorporate a mix of commercial hardware and AMSAT-developed radio payloads. Additional work includes AMSAT's development of linear transponder modules and other payloads designed for integration into university CubeSat missions. These systems allow partner institutions to use the hardware for mission communication, while also providing access to amateur radio operators when not in use. Glassbrenner also highlighted educational initiatives such as the CubeSat Simulator and youth outreach programs aimed at expanding student participation in amateur satellite operations. The full presentation can be viewed on YouTube.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. If you're thinking about getting into satellites, there are a couple good resources. If you go over to AMSAT.org and look in the store, you'll find the Getting Started in Amateur Satellites. Then another good resource is from the ARRL, and it is the Satellite Operating for Amateur Radio. Both can help you get started operating the satellites. You may already have what you need to start making contacts. I remember using a Yaesu dual-band HT and a Prime AL800 telescopic antenna to make many contacts on the LEO satellites as well as on the Mir. Now, it is a bit easier with an Arrow or Elk antenna. I have used a mobile radio with a 70-centimeter portion of the Arrow out the window of my car and a 2-meter antenna mounted on the trunk. When the satellite was near the horizon and rising, as I started to lose the signal, I hit the button to open the trunk. The antenna was now horizontal to the ground and allowed me to work the satellite at higher elevations. As the satellite started to come down, I jumped out and closed the trunk. What we will do to make some contacts. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for the weekly terrestrial propagation forecast and the solar weather forecast. Solar activity has been at low levels with frequent C-class flaring observed, primarily from regions 4420 and 4425. The largest flare of the period was a C5.1 on April 29th from region 4420. Region 4420 showed some slight decline in areal extent, with flux submergence noted in the trailing spots, though rotation and consolidation in the leading spots persist, and the region retains its delta configuration. Region 4425 showed some movement in the trailer spots with oversimplification, including loss of delta spot. Slight growth was observed in region 4423 and 4424 with new flux emergence noted in both. Region 4428 exhibited some growth with separation of the bipoles. Region 4427 remained an unremarkable unipolar spot in decay. No Earth-directed coronal mass ejections were observed in available coronagraph imagery. Solar activity is likely to reach moderate to moderate levels between April 30th through May 2nd, with a slight chance for X-class strong flares due primarily to the flare potential of regions 4420 and 25. Solar wind parameters are expected to remain at near nominal levels into April 30th. The onset of a coronal hole high-speed stream was anticipated by midday April 30th. Enhanced conditions are expected to persist through May 1st. Confidence is moderate given the relatively small source coronal hole. A return to near nominal levels is expected by May 2nd. For more information concerning radio propagation, you can visit the ARRL Technical Information Service where you can read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Carl Luetzel-Schwab K9LA. And remember, for customizable propagation charts, you can visit the VOA CAP online for ham radio website.
Just ahead in Radio Sport this week, May 1st, it's the AGCW QRP Party, that's CW. May 2nd, the RCC Cup, CW and Phone. And also on May 2nd, the SBMS 2.3 GHz and Up Contest and Club Challenge, CW, Phone, and Digital. And remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information in your area. Upcoming Section State and Division Conventions, May 3rd, it's the Warminster Amateur Radio Club Annual Hamfest, hosting the ARRL Eastern Pennsylvania Section Convention. That's in Bristol, Pennsylvania. May 9th, the ARRL Nebraska State Convention in Lincoln, Nebraska. And June 5th through the 7th, it's CPAC, hosting the ARRL Northwestern Division Convention. That's in Seaside, Oregon. And remember to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find more events in your area.
Ray Roberge, WA1CYB, will be the speaker at the 17th Annual AMSAT and Tapper Banquet. Roberge, a member of AMSAT's engineering team, will speak about progress on AMSAT's SDR Gen 2 project, including what it does and where it can be used. AMSAT's SDR Gen 2 is a versatile, programmable GNU radio transceiver transponder designed for a 1U CubeSat footprint. The transceiver has 144 MHz, 6 GHz continuous coverage, with 10 GHz coverage expected as well. The transceiver will support direct VHF, UHF, L, S, C, and X-band operations in all modes, including CW, SSB, FT8, narrowband FM, SSTV, FSTV, etc., and a downlink data rate of up to 1 megabits per second. The transceiver is being built to fly on Gulf and Fox Plus missions and will be both open source, hardware, and software. The 17th Annual AMSAT and Tapper Banquet will be held at the Kohler Presidential Banquet Center on Friday, May 15th at 1830 EDT. This dinner is always a highlight of the Tucson Amateur Packet Radio and AMSAT Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation activities during the Dayton Hamvention. The Kohler Presidential Banquet Center is located at 4548 Presidential Way in Kettering, Ohio, about 20 minutes away from the Greene County Fairgrounds. Tickets may be purchased from the AMSAT store. The banquet ticket purchase deadline is Monday, May 11th at 1700 EDT or 2100 UTC. Banquet tickets must be purchased in advance and will not be sold at the AMSAT booth. There will be no tickets to pick up at the AMSAT booth. Tickets purchased online will be maintained on a list with check-in at the door of the banquet center. Seating is limited to the number of meals reserved with the Kohler caterers based on the number of tickets sold by the deadline.
A leading U.S. antenna manufacturer is coming back to the ham radio marketplace following its departure last summer. Stepper, which announced last summer that it was halting production of its popular antennas for the amateur radio market, is returning to the ham radio business. A recent statement on the website of the Washington State Company said that although Stepper had decided last year to focus on commercial sales, recent favorable developments in that sector will permit the company to resume supplying hams with antenna kits, parts, and accessories as before. The ham radio market is to be served only through online sales. Stepper said that the commercial side of its business may lead to the introduction of new products for amateur radio. The company acknowledged that its earlier decision was made in search of more stable long-term income sources, but said that Stepper never gave up the hope that it would go back to serving amateur radio operators in some way.
Amateur Radio Digital Communications, ARDC, is looking to fill 2 part-time contract positions to support its ongoing work in software development. ARDC has remote positions open for a software developer and a technical writer who are experienced professionals familiar with free and open source projects. Both jobs are open to active amateur radio operators. The software developer is expected to be involved in bug fixes, code review, and deployment, and be capable of writing documentation that is developer-focused. JavaScript, CSS, HTML, MySQL, PHP, and Linux fluency is required. Candidates must have had prior experience with either ARDC or 44net. The technical writer must be capable of writing for a public audience on topics related to digital communications and amateur radio. A record of previously published articles is considered a plus. Both positions report to ARDC's technical director. For more details about requirements for these jobs, which carry a 2-month renewable contract, visit ARDC on the web at www.ardc.net.
Dayton Hamvention 2026 offers a wide range of forums to appeal to amateur radio operators of all interests, experience levels, and ages. The Hamvention Forums Committee has assembled a diverse lineup covering technical topics, operating skills, and emerging interest areas. John Ross, KD8IDJ, has the story.
On opening day, Friday, May 15th, there are 22 forums beginning at 9:15 a.m. with HamSci, the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation. Learn about the large-scale traveling ionospheric disturbance project, a version of the personal space weather station that you can build from scratch, Meteor Scour QSO party results, and an upcoming collaboration with the NASA mission. The moderator is Dr. Nathaniel Fussell, W2NAF. Another forum on Friday is Lightning Protection, Generators, Inverters, and RFI, moderated by Jim Batcher, WB8VSU, and Gary Bishop, NQ0V. At 11 a.m., ARRL is sponsoring Salty Walt's Portable Antenna Forum. Salty Walt Hudson K4OGO will cover simple, effective antennas that you can build and take to a park, bench, or summit and make contacts around the world. He'll also be signing copies of his newest book in the ARRL exhibit area. Among the other forums on Friday is TAPR, Topics in Digital Radio, the Antenna Forum, moderated by Tim Duffy, K3LR, and Arduino and Microcontrollers, Going the Distance with popular ARRL author Glenn Popeil, KW5GP. Young hams will want to start off Saturday morning with the Youth Forum, sponsored by the Radio Club of America, at 9:15 a.m. with student Weeblo presenters. An ARRL membership forum on Saturday at 11 a.m. will include updates on outreach to students and educators, momentum behind the Year of the Club, ARRL's partnership with America 250, and current legislative advocacy efforts shaping the future of amateur radio. That forum will be moderated by ARRL Great Lakes Division Director Scott Yonley, N8SY, with presentations from ARRL President Rick Roderick, K5UR, and ARRL CEO David Minster, NA2AA. Hamvention 2026 runs May 15th through the 17th, and many more forums are spread throughout the weekend. See the entire lineup and schedule at hamvention.org/event-details/forums. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Young hams can join in some Saturday afternoon fun on the ARRL Youth Rally activities, scheduled from 1 to 4 p.m. Advanced registration is recommended for those students ages 11 to 21 who want to join this year's Youth Rally t-shirt and badge. An ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio meetup will follow the Youth Rally at 4 p.m. A handful of DX-themed forums on Saturday include the 3Y0K Bouvet D-Expedition, the Desecho 2026 D-Expedition, the first all-solar-powered unattended D-Expedition, and a forum with Brian Bath, 88FD, and Paul Ewing, N6PSC, exploring the lessons learned from DXing in adverse conditions. Among the forums on Sunday is the POTA Hacks, Little Things Add Up to Big Success, moderated by Michael Martins, KB9VBR, who will share some of his favorite parks on the air operating tips and hacks. Other forums will cover the 3D printing for ham users, the HF digital modes, and mastering CW. The ARRL Events app will include the full Hamvention program by the end of the month. Use it to browse the schedule of forums, find affiliated events, and preview the extensive list of exhibitors. Get ready by downloading the app at www.tripbuildermedia.com, or you can use the web version.
May is an important month for hams in Canada who are using their radios to applaud and to thank the men and women who helped safeguard members of the public. In Canada, 2 special events in May are designed to be public service events too. Hams have organized Victor Bravo 3, Charlie Oscar Papa Sierra during Police Services Week, and Victor Bravo 3, Echo Mike Sierra during Paramedic Services Week, also known as Emergency Medical Services Week. Although both events are about getting on the air, there's a lot more to them than just QSOs. Between May 10th and 16th, a group of amateurs in southwest Ontario will be calling CQ as Victor Bravo 3, Charlie Oscar Papa Sierra as a thank you to the police for the various services they provide. This coincides with National Police Week, a campaign that began in 1970 in Canada, when those in police service also showcase their different responsibilities. Then, from May 17th through to the 23rd, hams using the call sign Victor Bravo 3 Echo Mike Sierra will honor first responders for their work and remind chasers of some basic safety tips, such as the need to know your blood type, your allergies, your emergency contacts, and how to perform CPR, among many other important points. For details, frequencies, and operating modes, see the QRZ.com pages for these stations.
Guest operators are being invited to get on the air this July as part of station GR2HQ, the Radio Society of Great Britain's headquarters team in the International Amateur Radio Union HF World Championship contest. With many of the station's regular operators involved already this year in assisting with the World Radio Sport Team Championship, opportunities are now available for visiting operators. In a notice in the WRTC 2026 Groups I.O. discussion, Nick Totterdell, G4FAL, chairman of the RSGB HF Contest Committee, said that the invitation to join the headquarters team station is extended only to those radio operators who are not committed to supporting the WRTC during the contest period. There is a good choice of locations throughout the UK. A maximum of 12 stations will be using the call sign GR2HQ in the IARU event from such locations in Wales, Scotland, and England on the 6 contest bands. Nick said the operating will be done in shifts at the various sites, most of which will be in members' homes. Some locations will also be operating field day style. Interested radio operators should send an email to contestclub@rsgbcc.org. That's Contest Club, all one word, at rsgbcc.org.
There's increasing popularity of remote activations as integral parts of DXpeditions. 2 recent DXpeditions that featured remote radio operations have been recognized by the Northern California DX Foundation, which is presenting both activations with the DXcellence Award, now in its 5th year. The criteria included the expedition's complexity, its impact on its most wanted ranking on Club Log, and, of course, overall performance. The Foundation's Board of Directors chose the KP5-NP3VI Desecheo DXpedition and the PJ6Y Youth DXpedition to Saba Island. Both adventures included remote radio operations. The KP5 operation was 100% remote as well as being solar-powered. The team's media officer, Steve N2AJ, said in a press release that having the first fully solar-powered, fully remote DXpedition was a groundbreaking achievement, adding that advanced technology and careful planning can deliver the world-class results while maintaining an exceptionally low environmental footprint. The team of operators was required to follow strict guidelines from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to ensure a minimal impact on the environment. That means no generators, no amplifiers, and no traditional beam antennas. The PJ6Y Youth DXpedition was chosen for its involvement of young operators from around the world who spent 2 weeks on the island of Saba. This more traditional style activation features some first-time DXpeditioners. It was supplemented with radios operated remotely by as many as 30 young amateurs from around the world. The technically complex arrangement was considered a success on many levels, most especially as an investment in the future of amateur radio for the next generation.
Japan began its earliest research into the Antarctic region in January of 1957 at a location on East Ongle Island, a facility that eventually expanded to become a global hub for atmospheric research. This enduring effort by the Japan Antarctic Research Expedition is about to be celebrated widely throughout Japan. 4 kilometers off the Antarctic mainland on East Ongle Island, the research facility known as Showa Station stands as the starting point where researchers from Japan long ago began unlocking the various mysteries of the atmosphere, including studies of the ozone layer. The station has since become a resource for the Japan Meteorological Agency, the National Institute of Polar Research, and other organizations. And at any given time, 30 researchers are engaged in observations and analysis. The facility is even home to a ham radio club station of the Japan Amateur Radio League, and members of the Japanese Antarctic Research Expedition Team call QRZ using the call sign 8J1RL. Starting this month and through the next January, the amateur radio action shifts north to Japan itself, where a different call sign is the one to listen for. Hams throughout Japan will be calling CQ as 8J70JARE, starting on May 22nd. Hams, who know well the importance of understanding the atmosphere, are paying tribute to the expedition's 70th anniversary and the team's establishment of this important research site. The on-air tribute will continue through to January 29, 2027, the date that marks the station's 70th anniversary.
Members of the next generation of amateur radio operators are stepping up to share their vision. Two young amateurs who have already gained experience by being DXers and DXpeditioners have been given the responsibility of helping guide support for future DXpeditions to top entities around the world. Violetta Latham, KN2P, and Max Friedman, N4ML, are now among the panel of directors who will oversee ways the private North California DX Foundation can provide financial support to those teams. Violetta's earliest DXpeditions include the Dave Coulter Memorial Youth DX Adventure in Curacao in 2018. According to her page on QRZ.com, she is scheduled to be part of the Zulu Kilo 3 team going to Tokelau in the South Pacific in November of this year, and to South Georgia for the VP0SG DXpedition in March of 2027. Max's recent DXpeditions include this year's 3Y0K activation of Bouvet Island, where he was the youngest member of the team, and his activation in Curacao as PJ2-N4ML. Their selection underscores the importance of bringing younger hams into the DXpedition universe. At the same meeting held on the 20th of April, the board accepted the resignation of George Wallner, AA7JV, who has been a leading proponent in developing radio-in-a-box technology for the DX community. His replacement is Greg Marco, W6IZT, who has developed a next-generation radio-in-a-box system that has been enabling more young hams around the world to become involved in DXpeditions via remote access. He has also led DXpedition teams that included young amateurs.
And our final story this week, a group of scientists from the University of the Basque Country in Spain has discovered something in Martian rocks that definitely should not be there. Traces of ink from a standard ballpoint pen. This discovery has nothing to do with extraterrestrial civilizations. As it turns out, the traces were left behind after the team prepared the samples they received from NASA's Johnson Space Center. This discovery highlights the critical vulnerability of space materials to terrestrial contamination, which can sometimes be impossible to remove. Despite the curious nature of the discovery, researchers insist there is no reason to doubt scientific findings. Modern analytical methods make it impossible to distinguish terrestrial contaminants from Martian materials with a high degree of accuracy. The likelihood that scientists would mistakenly interpret blue polyester as evidence of life on Mars is negligible. Nevertheless, this study serves as an important warning for the future. The Perseverance rover has been collecting soil samples that will eventually be returned to Earth as part of the Mars Sample Return mission. A team from the University of the Basque Country hopes that their recommendations will help improve decontamination protocols and minimize risks.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copies sent as an attachment to W2XBS77 at gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77 at gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeater systems all around the U.S. and around the world on great operations like WA0RCR from the center of the U.S., Wentzville, Missouri, where This Week in Amateur Radio is proud to be part of the legendary Gateway 160-meter net report each weekend. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.